And now to what you have all been waiting for. We are honored and thrilled to welcome Dean Phylicia Rashad to the AME Institute stage. A multiple Tony Award-winning actress and director, Dean Rashad became a household name and the original cool mom playing Claire Huxtable on The Cosby Show. She has been a true artist and a trailblazer throughout her career, and she is now Dean of the Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts at Howard University. Our original plan for this morning was to have Dean Rashad in conversation with Shari Hawley, one of our AME Institute board members. Shari is well, but she is resting due to some early labor pains that began last night. So, I am deeply grateful to Jacoby DuBose, Howard University faculty member and creative engineer, who has graciously stepped in to be in conversation with Dean Rashad this morning. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome. Thank you.
Is this going to be me? Yes.
Right here.
Good morning, all. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. I think I met a lot of you earlier this year in Oakland, so thank you for having me back. Thank you to Ashley for calling me late last night and asking me to step in. But it was a pleasure to actually, be of service this morning because I actually have the pleasure of sitting here on stage with my dean, Dean Phylicia Rashad. So this is not really a fireside chat for me. It's more like a conversation that we have daily at Howard University on a regular basis. So, Dean Rashad, to get this conversation started, the AME Institute would love to know and hear, when you think back to young Phylicia, talk to us about your experience as a child and a student getting your start in creativity. How did you learn that you were an artist? When did you learn that you were an artist?
I learned everything from my mother, Vivian Ayers. Everything. My mother is a poet, a scholar, a cultural activist. My mother was, she was determined to experience her full potential as a human being, and it was coming through literary art. And at the same time, she was in conversation and interaction with visual artists, with college professors, with high school teachers, with postal workers, with housekeepers. She's from Chester, South Carolina. I'm very proud to say that my parents are salt of the earth people. And I learned everything from her. So she's going to be 100 years old in July. And in preparation and planning for this birthday, my sister and I have been working with Clemson University Press to publish her second book, again, Hawk. And I'm saying all this to say because of your question. So if you can imagine 3 little children with this beautiful mother who would work every morning from 3 to 6, because that's when the world was quiet, and so were we.
Right.
Growing up in Houston, Texas, there weren't a lot of poets and writers that I knew about, and most people seemed not to understand my mother, as my father was a dentist, and that's another conversation. But she made sure that we understood, and we understood that her work was serious business. And before we would get up, we'd say, "Can we get up now?" Waking up in the morning, so as not to interrupt her process.
Correct.
So as young children, the first thing we learned was to respect artistic process and work. And we learned it at home. It was my mother who taught us to read music, because she was also a pianist. So she would bring in the whole crowd, all the friends. And I remember the day she taught us note value with candied Easter eggs, holding the thing up and saying, in 4/4 measure, this is 4 beats. And she proceeded to divide it in half and said, now each note is a half note and it gets 2 beats to the measure. She divided that thing into 16 parts. I was all of 5 or 6 years old. It was my first lesson in fractions, even though I didn't understand it at the time, but I never forgot it. She was always teaching us something. She was always taking us to places where there were things, big things happening that we couldn't possibly understand, and she knew that, but it didn't matter, because she also knew that she was planting seeds. And she shared her work with us as it was unfolding. So I began to play piano when I was 5.
Wow.
Not uncommon. Children can do all kinds of things if you don't tell them they can't.
That's true. That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah. And there were dancing lessons at the DeBato studio. Everybody who went wasn't going to be a dancer, but it was an activity, you know. And I had this thing, this voice, it was a quality my teachers recognized in elementary school, speech. So I was always being selected to say the prayer in the morning, or to give a little speech before assembly. Or by the time I was in 6th grade, this is when I discovered, to be the MC for a citywide music festival of the elementary schools.
Oh, wow.
And they rehearsed me day and night. There was no time on the playground. I was in rehearsal in the morning before class. I was in rehearsal in the afternoon after school. And I thought this was an endless cycle going to I did not know where. Lift your voice at the end of the sentence. Let me hear the T's and the S's and the G's. Where is your expression? Where is the joy? And I was like, okay, all right. Kids, you know.
Right.
There was one thing I wanted more than anything else, and it's what little girls always want, and that was to be beautiful, right? And I didn't think I was. But I was selected to be this MC, and I had to go on a little shopping trip and get a little nice little dress, a little tiara with flowers in it and ruffles on my socks.
Okay.
And then came the night of the festival, and it was in the biggest hall at the time in Houston. It was at the Houston Coliseum.
Oh, wow.
Where the circus would play when
Exactly.
it came to town, and the rodeo would take place. So there we were. And when I stood in the spotlight, and I'd never stood in a spotlight before, I held my script because they had given it to me, because I was supposed to read it. But because they had rehearsed me so much to my surprise, I didn't have to read it. And the light was so bright, I couldn't see anybody. I couldn't see anything. All I could see was light. So I stood and I talked to the light. And I just talked to the light and just talked to the light and just talked to the light all night long. And when it was over and parents were coming to get their children, I heard a couple of the mothers say, there she is. There's a little girl who spoke so beautifully. Isn't she beautiful? Aww. And I thought, when I grow up, I'll be an actress. I'll play in the light and be beautiful all the time.
A star was born. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, in that, you actually answered a lot of my second question, which was going to be, where did you get a lot of your creative influence from? So, it seems obvious that a lot of your creative influence early on came from your mother. And many of us, with the research we do about you, because I know all of you look up Dean Rashad at all times, they probably hear about your career as you became a student at Howard University and beyond. But prior to Howard University, and I've learned this stuff just from sitting in your office and you talking to me. Could you tell us about what life was like before Howard University, before Howard?
I was growing up in Houston, Texas. I was growing up in a time of legal segregation. And because there was so much art in our home, and at that time, truthfully, in the public schools, we played instruments that the school district owned. I studied viola in junior high school.
Wow.
I still remember my fingering. There was something else to pay attention to, and that something else was leading to understanding of one's own self as you were part of a team all the time, doing something great.
Right.
So teachers were very much a part of my development as an artist. Oh, very much a part of it. My music teacher in elementary school was Mrs. Vivian Harrison. Her husband taught me to play viola in junior high school. Will Henry Bennett and Mrs. Sheila were the musical influences in high school. And they were amazing human beings because just like all of you, they gave themselves selflessly to the development of their students. I mean, to the tune of finding extracurricular things that would augment our understanding of what we were doing and piling us all in their cars after school to transport us all the way across town. And Houston is big.
Big, very.
You know, for music sessions, for dance sessions, for baton twirling, for whatever it was. There were symposiums and there were contests, you know, in speech, in one-act plays, in music, in orchestra. We had a lot of activity, but we had that activity because our teachers made it so. Without that, it would have been just my mother.
Wow. So the teachers are very, very important. I hope you all are hearing that. You're a very critical point or part of each student's lives that you're affecting on a daily basis. Which brings me to a very, very important question. So, you know, as I prepared to become a professor at Howard University, you know, I was always a big fan of yours growing up. But I did a lot of research even before, you know, stepping back into those doors. And this question is around mentorship. So I saw how through the writings that you mentored some of the students who, one of which went on to become one of the most prolific actors of all times, and who is now, who our college is named after. So this is a two-sided question. How did mentorship affect your life and career? And then how did you see your mentorship affect the life and career of others?
When I was invited by Al Freeman Jr. to teach at Howard for a semester, I was engaged in television production.
Right.
So I would fly down one day a week on Friday after a week of work in the studio. And at first I was really reluctant because I said, I don't think that I know enough to teach it. I just know enough to know it, but I don't know enough to teach it, and I don't know what I would teach anybody. But then I discovered that for me, teaching was about learning. I feel that I learned so much more from my students than I could have ever possibly taught them. Of course, they will say something different.
Right.
But that was my experience. I was really learning from them. So it was so enjoyable. I always felt that the playing field was level and that my job was not to give them something that they didn't know, but to show them what they did know. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Because they know, you know. Oh, yeah, we're going to show some technical things maybe that you haven't worked with before.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to give you that. But what I wanted the students to understand was that within themselves, within each of them, lived the greatest actor, the greatest director, the greatest designer, the greatest choreographer, the greatest dancer, the greatest teacher. I wanted them to know that they were fully equipped with what was essential and that we were going to add the rest to it.
Add the rest to it.
I wanted them to have that confidence within themselves because the greatest thing, and I learned this from my mother, the greatest thing you can teach a child is that that child is smart. That's the greatest thing you can teach them. Because if you teach them that, they'll go on forever.
Yes.
Yes. So it was, I felt that it was a gift that was being given to me to interact with them.
Okay.
And they were fearless, and I loved it. You know, they were taking on, this was in acting that I was teaching. They were taking on scenes. They hadn't lived long enough to understand all that stuff they were talking about.
Right.
They hadn't lived long enough. But they weren't afraid, you know. And I was finding and discovering ways to awaken and unleash understanding within them that was already there.
Already there.
Already there. And that to me was like, okay, I like this. Yeah, I like this. I like this part.
Absolutely. It seems that, and this is just from my experience, you continue that on a daily basis with us, not only the students, but the faculty. You know, I actually had the pleasure of having my mother meet Dean Rashad during graduation, and one of the things I talk to my mom about all the time is Dean Rashad holds us all accountable. You know, you have it in you, but you are accountable for your skills, your knowledge, and you have to keep it growing. You have to keep using your tools that you have on a daily basis. So she keeps us sharp. You know, that saying, iron sharpens iron, it is definitely real when you're at Howard University working under Dean Rashad. So educators are also creatives. Educators are also artists. Mm-hmm. So how do you balance it all? You know, you are a very active hands-on dean at Howard University. When everyone's gone home and the classes are over and we've taught our lessons for the day and the students are probably in bed sleeping, you're still sometimes in your office at Howard working. But you also still have your professional career. Could you talk to us about how do you balance all of these things at this point in your career?
I pray a lot. I do. I do. You know, I do. And what I pray for, really, is to remember that I am not the doer. To remember that. Because if I understand that and I remember that, there's a very peaceful energy that flows through me. And I enjoy that feeling. And that energy respects everyone. You know, sometimes I'm listening to different points of view. Sometimes I'm listening to things that personally I may consider just wrong. Yeah, wrong. But if I can remember that I'm not the doer, it creates space for other people to be heard. And that's very important. That's very important. The biggest surprise in becoming a dean was the number of administrative tasks. Right? And I'm going to tell you, I have asked the question, where is there room for creative thought in all of this? Yes! And so I try to encourage us to think about how can we do this differently? Because we have to, because if we don't think about it, if we don't create it, it's not going to happen. Because these things are being handed to us by people who are not in a classroom, by people who are not interacting with students, but are doing the best that they know how to do in the seats in which they sit. So how do we communicate this? How do we demonstrate this? And what is the this that needs to be communicated? I kept thinking about it, because as long as I talked about myself, nobody was going to listen. But if I could frame the narrative with a truthful statement of how this ultimately impacts a student, there was a chance. There is a chance.
Absolutely.
How do I balance it all? I have to keep that same understanding when I'm on stage. I have to keep that same understanding when I'm in rehearsal. And let's make no mistake about this. This is not a passive stance. This is not a passive activity. It takes a lot of energy, focus, determination, and intention to hold this understanding. Because you could lose it in any second. That's how I balance it.
That's amazing. So you all in the audience, you're all educators in the state of California. You all are doing amazing things. So, even when I came out in March and I learned about AME and gave my keynote on film scoring, it was amazing to learn about how you're reshaping your programs and the amazing things that you're doing. So we are educators at the Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And we're an HBCU. So you all are on the, round of applause. We love what you're doing on the West Coast. And on the East Coast, we have quite a few things going on under the direction of Dean Phylicia Rashad. Could you share some of the things that you have coming up for the College of Fine Arts, such as, would you like to talk about our new building?
Okay, first of all, under my direction, after I just told him I'm not the doer, right? Did he hear me? Our college is really a space for collaboration. And I don't consider myself, and it was one of the first things that I said to faculty when I arrived, I can't do this by myself. We have to do this together.
It's something you say all the time.
I say it all the time. We have to do this together. I would say if there's anything that could be attributed to this tenure, it's really encouraging and supporting faculty in delivering ideas of what they would like to see. Don't I ask this all the time?
Yes, all the time.
What would you like to see? Sometimes I'll ask the question just flat out. How can I serve you? What do you need? Because faculty is doing the important work.
Yes.
And faculty must be supported. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not me leading anybody anywhere, so much as supporting where people would like to go. And then as I'm watching those things happen, then an idea will occur to me, and maybe I'll say something and somebody will pick up on it and say, oh yeah, let's do this, let's take it there, let's try this. One of the things there are some things that I would really like to see. We've had wonderful successes this year. Our art students exhibited at Art Basel.
It was amazing. Amazing.
And this was at they were guests of Microsoft. It was incredible.
It was.
It was unbelievable. And one of the artists was selected by the NBA and commissioned to do a basketball series that was featured in the All-Star Weekend. So imagine how that made these students feel. Yeah. All of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah. All right. In my first year, we were coming out of COVID. We had dance students who hadn't been in the classroom for over a year and a half. And what did they want to do? What all young people want to do. They wanted to post. And I said, well, what are you posting? Let me see it. And I said, no, you're not posting that. They were so mad at me. Oh, Dean Rashad. And I was like this, look, guys, I'm sorry. That's your calling card. That's your footprint. I don't think that's the one you want out there. Oh, I said, why don't you just go to class? Lean into the craft a little bit more. So this year, we invited Desmond Richardson, co-founder of Complexions Ballet. He came as artist in residence in the spring. He taught for 2 weeks, transformed those students in 2 weeks, and in the third week, his entire company came and performed with them on stage. And people sat in the audience wondering, well, which one's the student and who's in the company? Then I asked them, do you understand? Yeah, we understand.
It was amazing, too. That was a beautiful show.
Yeah, so exposure, access and exposure. I want to really support all of the efforts that give the students access and exposure to the best, because that's how I see them, as the best. So now a lot of those dancers are in summer programs in ballet companies throughout the country.
Right.
That is happening. We have now, I think, about 14 students in the UK at the British American Academy.
Mm-hmm.
What's it called? The British American Dramatic Academy.
Yes.
That's where they are. They're studying Shakespeare. They're studying the history of performers in Africa, of African descent, on the British stage. They're studying that. We have a wonderful art student who came into my office, child, crying the blues. Oh, they've set me up for failure. Oh, they carrying on. I just looked at her and I said, child, you're in the wrong department. You need to be in theater. Well, now she stands on her own. Her work is amazing, and she'll be studying in Florence this semester.
Yes, yes.
So there's this wonderful vision that President Frederick had, and that was to create a physical space that would house both the Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts and the Kathy Hughes School of Communication. So it's, looking at that, what does this building need to be to support these programs, these teachers and faculty and staff in administering these programs? Because that's a very big question. People who have never designed a theater before, or who have never designed, let's say, a television or recording studio before, got to do a little homework. You got to go looking for things, because we want the students to have what? The best.
The best.
The best. And then the very, very critical work of supporting students financially. And I know that you know all about this because you're teaching these young people. The cost of higher education today, have mercy on us, is all I got to say about it. Have mercy on us. It's astronomical. And faculty is not always rewarded, compensated in a way that I think is deserving. What are we going to do? Really, what are we going to do? To whom should we appeal? How do we organize in such a way as to continue our creative efforts with the proper infrastructure? Whose counsel shall we seek? How do we get these industries to understand you're supporting your own future? Because that's really the truth of the matter. You're supporting your own future. For me, that's the biggest part of the work right now. I won't always be at Howard, but there'll always be students, we hope. There'll always be faculty, we pray. And what can I do? What can I do to clear that pathway a little bit more to ensure the success of the future? That's a question. Mm-hmm.
Great, 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 great. Let's give Dean Rashad a round of applause.
Can you tell me? Thank you, Dean Rashad. Thank you, Jacoby. As you can see, we have up on our screens, we have about 15 more minutes with Dean Rashad. And this is the point where we invite you to submit your questions. Please use our app to do so. And I do have a ton of questions already that are pouring in. The first question is, Dean Rashad, what's one thing you can never compromise on in education?
The success of the student.
And another question, first of all, this is from Shane Churchill. Happy belated birthday to you, Dean Rashad. It was yesterday. For students wanting to apply to Howard, do you have any advice?
Do it early.
This is from Shauna D. Muhammad. How do you, as the dean, deal with issues of financial hardships of students who come to Howard with knowledge and skills to be successful at Howard but cannot? I'm not seeing the end of this. Cannot. That's all. Oh, but cannot.
Yeah, I understand. This is something we face every day, every semester, beginning, middle, and end. So we go hunting. We make inquiries outside of our university system. If there's not funding within the system, we make appeals. We try to find sponsors for our students. We try to forge those relationships and affiliations that'll be there for those purposes, because I don't want to lose any students. And I'd like to see people realize their dreams for the future. We've been pretty successful at it. But we know we have to keep going and do it another way. Gotta find a better way. But we still do. It's not easy. It's not easy. But we don't leave them behind.
All right, here's another question from Sarah Fung. Do you have any advice for secondary or primary teachers who are trying to inspire or encourage their students to explore their creativity, especially in non-arts courses?
Oh, yes. So, the thing about arts courses in art, think about all of the different academic disciplines that are inherent in the arts. Literature, philosophy, psychology, mathematics, engineering, physics, social studies, civics, economics, anatomy, physiology, business. It's all inherent in the arts, but we don't talk about the arts in this way. We don't represent the arts in this way. And that's why it's so easy for people to just, we know it, but for the people who don't know it, it's so easy for them to think that we just get up in the morning and do what we do because we got talent. It requires discipline and hard work. And intelligence, development of the intellect, is not to be ignored. No. So we have to convey that to young people. And that's where you come in, because you're the creative educators. And I know it's not easy to do this with state regimented curriculum. I know. But you got to, as Madeline Kahn used to say, you got to find a way to smuggle the work in, smuggle the art in. So you discover that. You discover those ways. People don't understand. Music is mathematics. Come on. You know, it's mathematics. I told you about my mother. I was 5, 6 years old learning about fractions. Art. Oh my God. So just think about a color spectrum and what that means in light. That's physics. If you can show a student who thinks they don't have that intellect to understand those things, that this is what you've been working with and you have understood it, and this is what it is, something goes, some light turns on inside them, and they realize what? Oh, yeah, I am smart. Oh, yeah, I can do this. I can learn this. History, all up and through the arts. Not only that, isn't this the truth? When we want to know something about civilization, societies in the past, what do we look to? Their art. It tells us everything about how they lived, what they cared about, what made their societies flourish or disappear. Art is fundamental expression, fundamental human expression. Before a child can read, a child can draw a picture. Before a child speaks, a child sings. And as soon as they can stand, come on, they are dancing. You know they're dancing. It is fundamental human expression. It's not some elitist activity, some otherworldly thing. Let's convey it to them in this way. And the intelligences inherent in it in this way. Then watch what happens.
All right, next question. In the beginning, how hard was it to make your way in the film industry?
Oh, it was impossible, child. Oh, well, not really. But it's like approaching a fortress, and you don't know where the entry is. And as long as you think of it that way, that's what it'll be. So I just started thinking about it another way. And I was really more concerned with continuing to develop myself as an actor than being in a film or anything else. And timing is everything. Things happen in their time, and everybody's time is different. Some things happen for people at age 15, and for others is age 45. You can't put a formula on it. You just have to know it's in you to do, and that's why you're doing it. And don't worry about reaching some plateau of success. My God, what is that? Is success something that's given to us? Or is success something that we achieve on the inside first? Yeah. It took a while. I was an understudy in The Wiz. I was a munchkin for 3.5 years, child. Rolling around a little munchkin stew. Yes, I was. I was an understudy in the theater for many years. And I didn't understand what that was giving me. It gave me everything, because I had to be able to turn on a dime. I had to be able to go in an instant, and I had to be able to go in an instant as if I had been featured the whole time, so that the other performers on stage didn't have to wonder or worry about what I was going to do. Was I going to be in the right place? Was I going to say the right line? Was I going to give them something to work with? They never had to think about that. And that was an ethic that continued, on into feature roles, and it happened when it should have. And I had to continue to grow to be ready for it.
This question is connected to that one. What would be the best piece of advice you would give young actors, especially those who do not see performing as a viable career?
Well, if you don't see it as a viable career, why are you doing it? Go do something else. Love what you do, and do it because it's in you to do. And I was speaking to some young ambassadors earlier, and they asked me a question about what was one of the most important lessons that I had learned. I learned that if my work became an offering, it was service. And with that, my career changed and it opened like a floodgate. As soon as it wasn't about me, and you hear this phrase a lot, showing people what you can do, but as soon as it became offering the best that was in me, the best of my understanding of humanity, and communicating that, everything changed. Service through our work elevates our work, whatever our work is. Whatever it is. That's how I view my work at Howard University. The title Dean is a title for me. The work is service.
Thank you.
I think we're at time now. Are we, Ashley?
I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. This first one is, how important do you think it is for film students to get experience in front and behind the camera?
Yeah, a film student should have experience behind the camera.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I assume you mean for someone who is performing in front of the camera to know what happens behind the camera. You know, in theater training, as an actor, I didn't just have acting lessons. I had to build sets. I had to make costumes. I had to move sets. We learned lighting. You have to learn the theater. And it's the same way in film. So you have appreciation for the people who are working around you, who are making your work significant. It's important.
There's actually 2 questions that kind of are both connected. The first is, what is a step we can take as educators to help our administration remove hurdles that block students' access and exposure to the best? And there's another question that connects to that, I think, as well. How do you not lose the forest for the trees as you deal with all the daily emergencies that pop up? So the infrastructure of school that makes it hard to be student-centered.
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, let's look at that. First of all, that stuff is put in place by people who think they're doing the right thing. Right?
Right.
They think they're doing the right thing. And that's why we have to have civil conversation. That's why we have to engage with one another and listen to one another. When people feel that they have been heard, they are very interested in listening to you. When they feel you have heard them, they're very interested in listening to you. Aren't you the same way? Do you really want to engage in conversation with somebody who's not listening to you? So we set up these boundaries and walls that just kind of pop up because they're not listening to me. I can't. Well, we got to help them listen. And so the way I think to do it, the entry point is, how does it affect the student? How does it impact the student's experience and learning? I think that's the entry point.
All right, I think this will be our last question. Please speak more about how you communicate the values of the arts and arts education to those who do not work in the field or do not initially have the same vision.
I stopped talking about it and started showing them. I mean, the time for talk is through. You have to show them. When it's seen, oh yeah. And then find ways to engage in interdisciplinary discourse and action, because that always augments the value of what we do. When we can demonstrate that, it's a good thing.
Good thing. Thank you so much, Dean Rashad, for this conversation this morning. I hope that you all have enjoyed it. Ashley, are we going on break now, or what's our?
Can we please give another round of applause for Dean Rashad?